Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are diving headfirst into one of the greatest, most enduring mysteries of the sea, the absolutely chilling case of the Mary Celeste. So how does an entire crew just vanish from a perfectly good ship? Let's get right into it. The date is December 4th, 1872. A ship is found just drifting out in the Atlantic Ocean. It's in great condition, ready to sail, but there's no one on board. Not a single person. So this drifting ghost ship, it was the Mary Celeste, and it was found by the crew of another ship, the Dei Gratia. But here's where it gets kind of weird, like something out of a movie. The captain of the Dei Gratia, a guy named David Morehouse, he was actually friends with the captain of the Mary Celeste, Benjamin Briggs. What are the odds? Okay, so take a look at this timeline. The last entry in the ship's log was November 25th. The ship was found on December 4th. That's a 9-day gap. 9 days where something happened. In that window, 10 people, the captain, his wife, their little 2-year-old daughter, and 7 crew members just disappeared. So the crew from the Dei Gratia climbs aboard, right? They're probably expecting to find chaos, signs of a storm or a fight. But that's not what they found at all. What they found was a puzzle, a really, really unsettling one. And this table, this really lays out the core mystery, doesn't it? The ship itself is fine. Their personal belongings, clothes, money, all there. The super valuable cargo, untouched. But the people are gone. And what did they take with them? The only lifeboat and the captain's navigation tools. Think about that. Why would you abandon a perfectly seaworthy ship in the middle of the ocean, taking only the bare minimum to escape? And the clues just get stranger. Sure, there was a bit of water in the hold, but nothing dangerous for a ship this size. The hatches to the cargo bay were open, and the lifeboat was gone, which definitely suggests they left on purpose, and maybe in a hurry. But then they found the captain's sword under his bed, and it had what looked, for all the world, like blood on it. And that one detail, well, that sent the investigation down a very dark path. So you've got this incredibly strange scene, right? It's the perfect recipe for rumors and wild theories to just explode. And that's exactly what happened. The story of the Mary Celeste took on a life of its own, becoming this massive global legend, full of all sorts of fiction that to this day people still believe is fact. Yeah, so it's super important to separate fact from fiction here. All those famous details you might have heard, the meal's still warm on the table, the tea still steaming, totally made up. And that blood on the sword we just talked about? Well, a quick analysis proved it was just rust. So a lot of the spookiest parts of the story, they never actually happened. Which, of course, leads to the big question. If there was no struggle, no ghost fight, then why do we all remember it that way? Where did all these myths come from? Well, the answer is pretty surprising, and it has to do with a very, very famous author. You got it. Years before he ever created Sherlock Holmes, a young Arthur Conan Doyle wrote a fictional horror story based on the Mary Celeste. He just made stuff up to make it scarier. He's the one who invented all the dramatic details. He even got the name of the ship wrong, calling it the Mary Celeste. And the public absolutely ate it up and started treating his story like it was a factual report. Okay, so back to the actual investigation. The authorities looked really hard at foul play. Could it have been pirates? Well, no, that doesn't make any sense. They left behind a cargo worth a ton of money. What about a mutiny? Maybe the crew got drunk and took over? Nope. The cargo was industrial alcohol. You literally can't drink it. Plus, Captain Briggs ran a tight, sober ship. None of the classic crime theories held any water. So if it wasn't pirates and it wasn't a mutiny, what was it? Well, it's time to look at the most credible theory we have. It's one that doesn't involve sea monsters or ghosts, but something much more scientific. And the biggest clue might have been right there with them the whole time, sitting quietly in the ship's hold. 1,701. That is a lot of barrels. And that's how many barrels of denatured alcohol the Mary Celeste was carrying. Now, just to be clear, this is not the kind of alcohol you'd drink. This is a powerful, highly flammable industrial chemical. Basically, they were sailing on a floating tinderbox. Now, remember those open hatches? Well, investigators found that 9 of the 1,701 barrels were empty. And here's the key. Those specific barrels were made out of a different kind of wood, a more porous red oak, which meant they were much more likely to leak. So you have these barrels slowly leaking flammable vapor into a sealed hot cargo hold. You see where this is going. It's literally a ticking time bomb. And this is how scientists think it all went down. First, the barrels leak alcohol vapor. The ship sails into warmer weather near the Azores, and those fumes expand, building up a ton of pressure. Then, some tiny spark, maybe from metal rubbing together, ignites the vapor. But instead of a huge, fiery explosion, it creates a massive pressure wave, a terrifying whoosh that would have been loud enough to blow the hatches off, but quick enough not to leave any scorch marks. If you're Captain Briggs, you hear that, you feel that. You'd absolutely believe your entire ship was about to blow sky high. So if you accept this theory, the whole story changes, doesn't it? It stops being a spooky ghost story or a violent crime novel. It becomes a tragedy, a really heartbreaking tragedy of circumstance, where one good, cautious decision went terribly, terribly wrong. And you really have to put yourself in Captain Briggs's shoes. This wasn't some reckless guy. He was a respected professional captain. He'd invested his own money into the ship, and most importantly, his wife and his 2-year-old daughter were on board with him. His #1 job was keeping them safe. So ordering everyone into the lifeboat, that wasn't panic. That was a father and a captain making what he thought was the only choice he had to save everyone. And then there's the final chapter for the ship itself, which is just dripping with irony. For years, people whispered about how the Mary Celeste mystery must have been some kind of clever insurance fraud. Well, the ship eventually got a reputation for being cursed, and then, years later, its final captain tried to commit a real insurance fraud scheme by deliberately wrecking it, and he failed miserably and died broke. You can't make this stuff up. But really, at the end of the day, when we talk about this great mystery, we have to remember the real people at the center of it. The true victim in all this might have been the captain's little boy, Arthur. He'd been left at home to go to school, and he spent the rest of his life waiting for his mom, his dad, and his little sister to come home from a voyage they'd never return from. So what are we left with? Was the Mary Celeste a ghost story, or was it just a perfect storm, a terrible combination of physics, fear, and really, really bad luck? The most likely answer isn't a monster or a ghost, but a completely plausible and deeply tragic chain of events that left a perfectly good ship sailing on, all by itself. Thanks for watching!